It was one of those cold, gray mornings in December when everything shifted. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing financial reports and preparing for a meeting, when my phone rang. The name on the screen was familiar, Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. I said, "Hi, Mom," in the usual way, with a smile I didn't mean. But her voice on the other end was cold, distant. "Amelia, you're a burden. You don't belong here anymore." I froze, the words not fully registering at first. My mind scrambled to make sense of them. This couldn't be real. I thought maybe I misunderstood. But then, there was no mistaking the harsh finality in her voice. My own mother was telling me I had overstayed my welcome in the place I called home. I was no longer needed, Mom? I whispered, trying to find my voice. "You've stayed here long enough. I don't want you here anymore," she continued, her tone unwavering. The words hit me like a slap. I could barely breathe. I had always been there for them, paying bills, handling their finances, making sure they had everything they needed. And yet, here I was, being dismissed. I thought I was helping my family, but in that moment, I realized I had been taken for granted. Without saying another word, I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking as I sat there in disbelief. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't imagined that, after all I had done, I would be treated like this. What did I even do wrong? Was my presence truly a burden? Or had they just grown too comfortable with the sacrifices I made? Growing up, I always knew that my family wasn't perfect. My father, Harold, had struggled with jobs for as long as I could remember. The last job he held ended 3 years ago, and since then, he hadn't been able to find stable work. My mother, Diane, worked part-time at the local library. But her earnings barely covered the basics, let alone the mounting bills that piled up month after month. I was the one who picked up the slack. I was the one who made sure the rent got paid, the electricity stayed on, and the groceries were stocked. I never minded it at first. In fact, I thought I was doing what any daughter would do. But as the years went by, I started to feel the weight of it. The unspoken expectation that I would always be there to bail them out began to wear on me. At first, it didn't bother me. I loved my family. I told myself that I was doing what I needed to, what I had to do, to help them get by. But the longer I stayed in that role, the more I started to resent it. My father would sit at the dinner table, staring at the ceiling as if he was waiting for some miracle to fall into his lap. My mother would nod quietly, agreeing with him as if she, too, was waiting for someone to swoop in and save them. I wasn't angry at them for needing help. I was angry because, deep down, I knew they didn't appreciate what I was doing. They didn't understand the toll it took on me. They didn't see how much it hurt to keep giving when there was nothing left to give. And then there was Sam, my 22-year-old brother. He was still living at home, still figuring things out, but it felt like he was relying on me just as much as my parents. He wasn't lazy, but he didn't seem to have the same urgency to leave the nest. I loved him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was counting on me to make everything okay. I didn't mind helping Sam, I wanted to. But the burden was heavy, and no one seemed to notice. No one seemed to care. And that was when I began to feel the weight of it all. I had worked hard to keep everything together. I had sacrificed my own plans, my own dreams, to make sure they had what they needed. I thought it was worth it. I thought that one day, my family would appreciate what I had done. But as the years passed, it became clear that they saw it as my duty, not my choice. The night everything changed, I came home after a long day at work, still wrapped in my thick coat. The smell of coffee lingered on my sleeves, a comforting reminder of the warmth of my office. But when I opened the door, the house felt colder than usual. The Christmas tree was sitting in the corner, decorated haphazardly with old lights. It looked like it had been thrown together last minute, a reflection of the state of our home. My mother, Diane, was setting a plate of ham on the table, her hands shaking slightly. My father, Harold, was sitting at the head of the table, staring blankly at the ceiling. Dinner started as it always did, silently. My father didn't speak much, and my mother, always the peacekeeper, was careful with every movement. I scooped some mashed potatoes onto my plate, trying to ignore the tension in the air. It was then that my father, without warning, slammed his knife down on the table. The sound rang through the room, startling me. I looked up, meeting his gaze. His face was set, his eyes cold. "Amelia, you're a burden. You need to move out," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What did you just say?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "You heard me," he replied, his tone low and firm. "You've stayed here long enough. This is my house, and I'm saying enough is enough. You need to leave." I felt a wave of shock wash over me, followed by a deep, cold anger. I hadn't stayed because I needed to. I stayed because they needed me. I had been carrying the weight of this family for years, making sure everything ran smoothly. But now, they were pushing me out without a second thought. I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking. I had given so much of myself, and now, it was like it meant nothing. My mother let out a nervous laugh, trying to smooth over the tension, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't surprised. She had seen it coming, just like I had. Sam sat next to me, his fork frozen mid-air. His wide eyes met mine. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. I slowly set my fork down. I needed to process this. My mind was racing, but I couldn't make sense of it. "What did you mean?" I finally managed to ask. "What am I supposed to do now?" My father's response was cold, matter of fact. "You need to move out. You've been here long enough. You're a burden." And just like that, everything changed. I sat there, frozen, the weight of my father's words hanging heavily in the air. I wanted to shout, to scream, to demand an explanation, but nothing came out. I was numb. How had things gotten to this point? How had I been pushed so far, only to be discarded when I was no longer of use? I stood up slowly, unsure of what to do next. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew there was no going back. The feeling of betrayal was suffocating, but at the same time, I knew what I had to do. I had to leave. I could have stayed and fought, but what was the point? My family had made their decision, and deep down, I knew it wasn't going to change. I had spent years making excuses for them. But now, I had to make a decision for myself. I walked to the kitchen and placed my half-eaten plate in the sink. I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to sit in that room with them, pretending everything was okay. I didn't want to be in a house where my sacrifices were taken for granted. Before I left the kitchen, I turned to Sam. He was sitting at the table, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. I could see the fear in his face, the worry that I might be walking away for good. "I'm leaving, Sam," I said softly. "I can't stay here anymore." His eyes filled with confusion and sorrow. He didn't understand why I was leaving. But I didn't have the energy to explain it all to him. He was still young, still caught in the middle of this mess, and I couldn't keep dragging him into it. "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'll figure it out," I said, trying to sound more certain than I felt. "I have enough saved. I'll find a place of my own." I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there any longer. It was time for me to go. Time for me to start living for myself. I went upstairs and closed the door behind me. The room was still familiar, but everything felt different now. I had been living there for so long, doing everything for my family, but now, I was packing up my life and walking away. No more excuses. No more pretending. I opened my closet and began folding my clothes, taking my time, but every movement felt like a weight being lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't just the clothes I was packing, it was everything I had carried for years. The guilt, the resentment, the unspoken burden that had weighed me down. It was all coming with me as I walked out the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just packed quietly, methodically, like I was going through the motions. I had no idea what the future would hold, but I knew one thing: I couldn't stay in that house any longer, and as I zipped up my suitcase, I heard a soft knock at the door. "Joanna?" It was Sam's voice, barely a whisper. I opened the door and looked at him. He stood there, his shoulders hunched, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Are you really leaving?" he asked, his voice breaking. I nodded. "They don't want me here, Sam. I have no choice." He stepped into the room, his eyes searching my face for answers. "But what about everything? Who's going to pay for the bills? Who's going to help us?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I had been paying for everything for years, and it had drained me. I couldn't keep doing it, not when I was treated like an outsider in my own home. They needed to face the reality of their own choices. "I know it's hard, Sam," I said softly. "But I can't live my life as a walking wallet anymore. I deserve more than that." He didn't say anything for a while. He just looked at me, as if trying to process everything that had just happened. "If you go, who's going to fix things? Who's going to make sure we don't fall apart?" I sighed and sat down on the edge of my bed. "You'll figure it out, Sam. You have to. I can't keep holding everything together for everyone." Sam looked at me with sad eyes, but I could see the determination in his gaze. He wasn't a child anymore. He was capable of standing on his own 2 feet. I just hoped he would realize it soon. "I'll be okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "But you need to stay strong. You can't keep depending on me forever." He nodded slowly. His lips pressed together in a thin line. "I'll miss you," he said quietly. "But I get it. I don't want you to be stuck here anymore." I hugged him tightly, feeling his arms around me. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I was leaving. I was finally choosing myself. And I hoped he would do the same someday. "I'll miss you too, Sam. I'll always be here for you," I said, pulling away. "Just hold on a little longer, okay? Once you're old enough, I'll help you get out of here. I'll help you make your own way." He nodded, though I could see the doubt in his eyes. But he had to believe that I was right. We both had to believe that we could make it out. I gave him one last look, one last promise, and then I turned to my suitcase. I wasn't going to turn back. I left that night. It wasn't dramatic. There were no final words, no apologies, no emotional farewells. I just walked out the door, suitcase in hand, and never looked back. The world outside was colder than the house I had just left, but it felt different, liberating, almost. For the first time in years, I wasn't bound by obligations. I wasn't tied down by responsibilities I didn't choose. Marissa had offered me a place to stay, and though I was still processing everything that had happened, I was grateful for her support. Her apartment was small but warm, a safe space where I could finally breathe without the constant weight of guilt or the suffocating sense of duty. It was funny how a change of scenery could make you feel like a different person. The first few days were quiet. I spent a lot of time alone, reflecting on everything. I started to see things more clearly. I realized that my entire life had been dictated by other people's expectations. I had spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to make everyone else happy, that I had forgotten to live for myself. Marissa checked in on me regularly, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. She was a good friend, always there for me when I needed her, but it was hard to explain to her how much I had been carrying. She didn't know the full extent of my sacrifices, the toll it had taken on me. And I wasn't sure how to tell her. How do you explain to someone that you've spent years giving everything you had to people who never once asked how you were doing? How do you explain that your life felt like it was slipping away while you tried to keep everyone else afloat? But there was one thing I knew for sure: I couldn't go back. I couldn't let myself fall into the same cycle of guilt and obligation again. I got a part-time job at a nearby cafe. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for myself. I wasn't paying anyone's bills. I wasn't fixing anything. I was just living. And that was enough. Every day, I felt a little more free. I found comfort in the small things, the quiet mornings when I could sit with my coffee and read, the afternoons when I could walk through the city, the evenings when I could cook for myself without having to worry about anyone else. It was a simple life, but it was mine. It didn't take long for things to start falling apart for my family. Without me there to pay the bills, to keep the lights on, they struggled. The power got shut off, the water was cut, and the phone line went dead. My father, as always, refused to take responsibility. He was angry at me for leaving, angry at the world for not handing him the things he thought he deserved. I tried not to feel guilty. I tried not to let their problems become mine again, but it was hard. I had spent so many years keeping them afloat. Now, when they were drowning without me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of that. I heard from Sam a few days later. He was frantic, scared. "Joanna," he texted. "Dad's lost it. He's blaming you for everything." I don't know what to do. The message hit me like a punch. I wasn't surprised, but the guilt gnawed at me. I knew that Sam didn't have the resources or the strength to fix what was broken. He was still too young to carry the weight of the family on his shoulders, and I had left him there to figure it out on his own, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't fix their problems. They had to face the consequences of their actions. I had given them everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing myself just to watch them fall apart, but the messages kept coming. "Joanna, I don't know what to do. Dad's flipping out. He's threatening to kick me out too," Sam texted, his voice filled with panic. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I had to protect myself. I had to let them face the reality of their choices. I had to stop being the one who fixed everything. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was the only way I could truly be free. The message came on a rainy Thursday morning, the kind of day where the world felt quiet, as if it was holding its breath. Sam's words on the screen were simple, but they carried so much weight. "Joanna, I think Dad's trying to get into your bank account. I saw him with Mom's old notebook. He's been trying to figure out your passwords. I'm scared." A chill ran through me. I knew this moment would come. My father had always found ways to get what he wanted, usually by manipulating the people closest to him. But this felt like crossing a line. I had already been careful, locking down all my accounts, but my father's persistence was a dangerous thing. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. He couldn't handle the idea of losing control over me, over the way I had always taken care of everything. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the message. My mind raced with all the things I should do, all the precautions I should take. But at the same time, I felt numb. This wasn't the first time I had felt threatened. But it was the first time I realized how far he would go to make sure I couldn't escape. I had to protect myself. I had to make sure this time, there was no way for him to get through to me. I picked up my phone and immediately called Sam. "Sam," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. "Don't worry. I'm going to take care of this. You need to change your passwords. All of them. Don't let him in, no matter what. Don't give him any information." "But what if he gets to you, Joanna? What if he tries to get into your accounts?" Sam's voice was shaky, and I could feel his fear through the phone. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to sound more confident than I felt. "Sam, listen to me. I've locked everything down. I'm changing all the passwords, adding extra layers of security. He can't get in, not if I stop him first." I paused for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. "You need to be careful. Don't let him manipulate you into giving him anything. He's only doing this because he's desperate." I could hear the silence on the other end of the line. I knew Sam was processing everything I was telling him, trying to understand just how deep the problem had become. "Okay," Sam finally said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "But what happens if he comes after you again?" "I won't let him," I replied, my tone steady. But if he does, I'll deal with it. You just focus on staying safe. I hung up the phone and sat there for a while, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. The truth was, I had been avoiding this moment for so long. I had been ignoring the signs, hoping things would magically get better. But they never did. No matter how much I gave, no matter how much I sacrificed, it was never enough. I knew now, more than ever, that I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself just to have them taken for granted. It was time to draw the line. I immediately went through all of my accounts, updating passwords and enabling two-factor authentication. I had already done this once. But I didn't trust that it was enough. I changed every password, locked down my credit cards, and added extra security layers to everything. It felt like I was putting up walls, brick by brick, to protect myself. It was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, but I knew it had to be done. I then went through my financial documents, ensuring that nothing had been tampered with. I had seen how far my father was willing to go, and I couldn't risk him accessing anything that would put me at risk. The reality of what I was doing hit me hard. I was truly shutting him out. I was creating a barrier between us that couldn't be crossed, but I had no choice. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my safety. It was about finally taking control of my life. I couldn't let him keep pulling the strings. I couldn't let him keep using me. A few days later, the inevitable happened. I received another message from Sam. "Joanna, Dad's here. He's standing outside the door. He keeps shouting that he's going to make things right. He won't leave." I felt my stomach drop. I knew this was coming. I had been waiting for it. The moment when my father would realize that I wasn't going to just roll over and take it anymore. He had always relied on my willingness to fix things for him, to handle the messes he made, but that was no longer the case. "I'll be there soon," I texted Sam. My fingers shaking as I typed. I grabbed my keys and my phone, heading toward the door of my apartment. As I walked through the hall to the parking lot, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was the moment when everything changed. There was no going back. My father had crossed a line, and now I had to face the consequences of my decision to cut ties with him. I drove to Sam's house, my mind racing with thoughts of what I was going to do. Part of me wanted to call the police right away, but I also knew that confronting him directly was the only way to get him to understand that I wasn't backing down. He needed to hear it from me. When I arrived, Sam was standing at the door. His face pale. He looked relieved to see me but scared of what was happening. I could hear my father's voice from inside the house, loud and angry. "I'll handle this," I said to Sam, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. My father opened the door, and there he was, the man I had spent so many years trying to save, trying to protect, now standing in front of me, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can just walk away from this family?" he shouted. "You think you can just abandon us and get away with it?" I took a deep breath and looked him in the eye. "I'm not abandoning you, Dad. I'm choosing to live my life on my own terms. I've done everything for you. I've carried this family for years. And now, I'm done." His face turned red with fury. "You owe me everything," he yelled. "You're nothing without me." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm not. I'm everything because I chose to take care of myself for once." His face twisted with anger, but I didn't back down. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dad," I said, my voice firm. "You've lost control over me." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, helpless and defeated. The next few weeks felt like a blur. I didn't know how to explain it, but everything was shifting. The weight I had been carrying for years had started to feel lighter, almost as if it was being peeled off me piece by piece. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was constantly running on empty. I wasn't living for anyone else. I wasn't trying to make up for anyone else's mistakes. I was just living for myself. And that feeling was both terrifying and liberating. I stayed with Marissa, grateful for her kindness and the safety of her home. The apartment was small, but it was my own space, and that was something I had never really experienced before. There were no expectations. No demands. There was only quiet, peaceful freedom. But still, I couldn't fully escape the thoughts of what I had left behind. Every time I looked at my phone, there would be another message from Sam, another update on how things were going at home. Sometimes it was about how my father was still angry, still blaming me for everything, or how my mother seemed lost without me. I wanted to respond, to comfort him, to make it all better, but I knew that I couldn't. I couldn't fix them anymore. I would never stop caring about Sam, and I would never turn my back on him, but I knew something had shifted. I had spent so many years trying to be the glue that held my family together, thinking that if I just tried hard enough, things would get better. But they didn't. They just kept taking, and I kept giving, until there was nothing left of me. I couldn't keep doing that, and so, I focused on me. I found a job at a local cafe, something simple but enough to keep me busy and make ends meet. I started working through the pile of emotions I had buried for so long, sitting in silence with them, letting them wash over me instead of running away from them like I had in the past. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I was drowning, when the guilt crept in and tried to convince me that I had done something wrong. But on those days, I reminded myself why I had left. I reminded myself that I had chosen my own happiness. My own peace. For the first time in a long time, I was learning to take care of myself. I was learning that it was okay to put myself first, even if that meant letting go of people I loved. I didn't owe anyone my happiness. I didn't owe anyone my peace. My life was mine to live, and it was time for me to stop living for others and start living for me. But even as I started to find peace in my new life, there were moments when I missed my family. I missed the way things used to be when I was a little girl, when my parents had dreams, when we were a real family. I missed the hope I used to have that one day, we would all be okay. But I also knew that hope had been a lie. I had been lying to myself for years, thinking that if I just kept giving, if I just kept trying, they would change. But they never did. And the truth was, it wasn't my responsibility to make them change. It wasn't my responsibility to fix them. I continued to work at the cafe, finding solace in the routine, the simplicity of it all. But I couldn't help but think about Sam. He was still stuck in that house, still caught in the web of their dysfunction. I knew he needed me, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't be the one to fix everything for him anymore. He had to figure things out for himself. It hurt. It hurt to think of him struggling, knowing that I couldn't just swoop in and make everything okay. But I had to let go. I had to let him find his own way, just like I was finding mine. I called him one night, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I couldn't fix. "Sam, are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft. "You're still hanging in there?" "I'm fine," he said, but I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "It's hard, but I'm making it. I miss you, Joe." I took a deep breath. "I miss you too, Sam. But you have to take care of yourself now. You can't keep depending on me. You have to find your own path." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm trying. But it's hard, Joe. You know how hard it is here." I could hear the pain in his voice, and it broke my heart. I wished I could make it all better for him. But I knew I couldn't. I had to let him go, too. He had to learn to live for himself, just like I had. "I know, Sam," I said gently. "But you're strong. You're going to be okay. You're not alone. And when you're ready, I'll be here. But you need to take care of yourself, too. Don't keep carrying their weight." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I'll try, Joe. I promise." I ended the call, feeling a sense of both relief and sadness. I had let him go, just like I had let go of everything else. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We both had to find our own way, even if it meant walking away from everything we had known. As the weeks went by, I began to see the changes in myself. I started to believe that I deserved to be happy, that I didn't have to keep sacrificing everything for people who weren't willing to change. I started to realize that I was enough, just as I was. I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need anyone's validation. I was allowed to live my life on my terms, without feeling guilty for putting myself first. I met new people, people who respected my boundaries and didn't take me for granted. I made new friends who didn't see me as a caretaker, but as a person. And slowly, I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece, but despite all the progress I had made, there was still a part of me that wondered if I had made the right choice. Was walking away really the right thing to do? Had I been too harsh? Was it too late to fix things with my family? Then one day, I got a message from Sam that made everything clear. "I made it, Joe," he wrote. "I'm at college now. I'm doing okay. I'm finally starting to believe I can make it on my own." Tears welled up in my eyes as I read his words. He had done it. He had finally taken the step I had hoped he would. He was starting his own life, and he was going to be okay. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I had made the right choice. I had walked away so that we both could find our way. And now, Sam was finding his path, just like I had found mine. Conclusion: I learned something invaluable in this journey. Happiness isn't something you give away to everyone else while you sacrifice your own. True happiness comes from living for yourself. You have the right to choose your own path, to create a life that makes you happy. And that means letting go of relationships that drain you, no matter how hard it may be. Walking away isn't always easy. It isn't always clear. But sometimes, it's the only way to find peace. Choose yourself. Always, and remember, you are not a burden. You are not obligated to carry the weight of the world for anyone else. Your life is yours to live, and you have the right to make choices that protect your peace, your happiness, and your future. If you are in a situation where you feel like you are giving everything without getting anything in return, I want you to know, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself. Because in the end, your happiness is worth more than any sacrifice. Choose yourself. Choose freedom. Choose a life that's yours to live.